Thomas Jefferson, standing on the portico of his Monticello home, could gaze out upon a rolling sea of green. He saw cultivated fields. He saw dense woodlands. He saw the distant Blue Ridge Mountains. This vista was not merely a pretty view. To him, it was a political statement. It was the very picture of his ideal America. He had grown up in the heart of rural Virginia, shaped by the rhythms of the seasons and the toil of working the soil. He believed the strength and moral fiber of the nation rested not in bustling port cities, nor in nascent financial centers, but in the quiet dignity of independent farmers. These were the people he called the chosen people of God. For Jefferson, the connection between land and character was absolute. A farmer, he thought, was a truly free individual. Owning a modest plot gave a man a stake in the nation. It made him self-reliant and anchored him to his community. Unlike a factory worker in a crowded city, a farmer did not depend on the whims of a distant employer. His fortunes were tied to the soil under his feet and the sky above his head. This independence, Jefferson argued, natural virtue. It fostered a sense of responsibility. It fostered the clear-headedness of the perfect citizen in a republic. The vision drew on classical ideals and his observations of European society. As diplomat in France, he saw the contrast between landed aristocracy and the urban poor. He saw the squalor. He saw the corruption. He saw social unrest in the great cities of the Old World. He became convinced America must follow a different path. It must avoid creating a large, landless working class, a proletariat dependent on wage labor. Such a class, he feared, could be manipulated by demagogues or oppressed by powerful industrialists eroding liberty. Therefore, his political philosophy rested on an agrarian foundation. Every policy was weighed. Would it strengthen the small independent farmer? He imagined a continent-spanning republic of small homesteads, families working their own land, producing what they needed, participating in local democracy as equals. This was not mere romance. It was a careful blueprint for the survival of freedom. It drove him to one of the most audacious and constitutionally questionable decisions in American history. It was that serious. To truly grasp Jefferson's thinking, one must understand that for him, land ownership was synonymous with personal liberty. In the 18th century world, the ownership of property, specifically land, was the primary qualification for voting and for full participation in civic life. A man who owned his own farm was his own master. He could not be easily coerced by a landlord, an employer, a government official. This economic independence was the bedrock upon which political independence was built. A nation composed of such men, Jefferson reasoned, would be a nation of free thinkers who would jealously guard their rights against any encroachment by a powerful central government. This belief in the power of land extended into the moral realm. Jefferson held a deep conviction that working the soil instilled virtue. The farmer, he wrote, looks to heaven and his own soil and industry for his subsistence. This direct relationship with nature, with the cycles of planting and harvesting, fostered honesty, patience, and a hardy self-reliance. It was a life of tangible results, where hard work translated directly into sustenance and security. This was a world away from the abstract and often morally ambiguous world of finance, speculation, commerce, that he saw beginning to take hold in cities like New York, Philadelphia. Contrast this ideal yeoman farmer with the city dweller in Jefferson's mind. The urban artisan laborer, no matter how skilled, was fundamentally dependent. He relied on a wage paid by an employer, lived in rented lodgings and bought his food from a market. This web of dependencies made him vulnerable. A sudden downturn in trade could leave him destitute. A powerful employer could dictate his working hours, but also his political views. Jefferson feared that large concentrations of such dependent men would create sores on the body politic, leading to mob rule, social decay, as he believed he had seen in the streets of Paris during the French Revolution. Therefore, the widespread distribution of land was not merely an economic policy. It was a moral and political imperative. It was the mechanism by which the Republic could continually renew itself, creating new generations of virtuous, independent citizens. By ensuring that land was cheap and plentiful, the nation could provide a safety valve for its growing population. A poor but ambitious man in an eastern city could always pull up stakes and head west, where he could acquire his own farm, and with it his independence and his full rights as a citizen. This westward movement was, in Jefferson's view, the very engine of American liberty. Section 5. Opportunity knocks across the Atlantic. The Louisiana Question. The opportunity Jefferson had been waiting for arrived in the early 1800s, born from the ambitions and troubles of Napoleon Bonaparte. For decades, the vast territory known as Louisiana, which stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, had been a colonial chess piece, passed between France and Spain. In 1800, through a secret treaty, Spain had returned the territory to a newly powerful France under Napoleon. This development sent a shock wave of alarm through Washington. While a weak and declining Spain as a neighbor was manageable, a powerful and ambitious France, led by a military genius, was an entirely different and far more dangerous proposition. The immediate crisis centered on the port of New Orleans. This city, near the mouth of the Mississippi River, was the indispensable gateway for virtually all American commerce west of the Appalachian Mountains. Farmers in Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee floated their grain, pork, and tobacco on flatboats down the river to New Orleans, where the goods were loaded onto ocean-going ships bound for the East Coast and Europe. In 1802, the Spanish officials still administering the port abruptly revoked the right of deposit for Americans, effectively closing the river to their trade. While this was a Spanish action, most Americans, including Jefferson, believed it was done at the behest of the new French masters. The outcry from Western farmers was immediate and furious. They were facing economic ruin. Many called for war, demanding that the United States seize New Orleans by force to secure their livelihoods. Jefferson understood their rage and their desperation, but he was a man who preferred diplomacy to war. He knew that a military conflict with Napoleonic France would be a disastrous undertaking for the young republic. Instead, he decided to play for time and pursue a diplomatic solution. His goal was clear and, at first, relatively modest: to purchase the city of New Orleans and a slice of coastal land known as West Florida. To this end, he dispatched his trusted friend and diplomat James Monroe to Paris in early 1803. Monroe was to join the American minister already there, Robert Livingston, with instructions to offer up to $10 million for New Orleans and the Floridas. The fate of Jefferson's agrarian vision, and perhaps the unity of the nation itself, hung in the balance. If they failed, war seemed almost inevitable. If they succeeded, they would secure the economic future of the Western farmers and keep the dream of an expanding republic of yeomen alive. Napoleon, facing a renewed war with Great Britain and needing a vast sum of money, had decided to cut his losses in North America. A recent disastrous failed attempt to suppress a slave revolt in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, had soured him on the idea of a new world empire. He made a breathtaking offer. He would sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory, all 828,000 square miles, to the United States for the price of $15 million. It was a deal of unimaginable scale, an opportunity to double the size of the country overnight. For Monroe and Livingston, the opportunity was too good to pass up. They knew they had exceeded their instructions, but they also knew a chance like this would never come again. They quickly negotiated the terms, and on April 30th, 1803, signed the treaty. When news of the Louisiana Purchase reached Washington, it presented Jefferson with a profound personal and political crisis. His career had been built on strict constructionism, the belief the federal government had only powers explicitly granted by the Constitution. Any action not specifically authorized was unconstitutional. Jefferson scoured the Constitution, the document he revered. He could find no clause, no article, no phrase that gave the President or Congress the power to acquire foreign territory and incorporate it into the Union. This was not a minor oversight, it was a fundamental question of authority. Federalists had long accused him of hypocrisy, and now he faced a choice that seemed to force him to abandon his principle. To proceed would be to adopt the broad interpretation of federal power he had condemned when Hamilton created a national bank. For a time, Jefferson agonized over the dilemma. He drafted a constitutional amendment to grant the power to acquire territory, hoping to pass it before the deal was final. Advisers warned the process would take too long. Napoleon was notoriously fickle, and the deal could vanish as quickly as it had appeared. He was told to act decisively or risk losing Louisiana forever. In the end, Thomas Jefferson made a pragmatic choice. He decided to bet on his vision for America's future rather than adhere to his own strict interpretation of its legal past. He reasoned that the immense good from the Louisiana Purchase far outweighed the constitutional questions it raised. The chance to secure the nation's borders, remove a powerful European rival from the continent, provide a seemingly endless supply of land for future generations of farmers. It was the ultimate fulfillment of his empire for liberty. He quietly set aside his draft for a constitutional amendment and urged the Senate to approve the treaty. He justified his decision by arguing the power to acquire territory was inherent in the government's power to make treaties. This was a flexible or loose constructionist argument. His Federalist opponents seized on the apparent hypocrisy, but their protests were drowned out by overwhelming public and political support. The promise of new land and new opportunity was simply too popular to oppose effectively. The Senate ratified the treaty with a decisive vote of 24-7 in October 1803. With that single act, the United States doubled in size. The nation now stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains. Jefferson immediately began making plans to explore the new territory. He dispatched the Lewis and Clark expedition. They were to chart the land, to document its resources, and to record its native inhabitants. For him, this was not just a land acquisition, it was the securing of the nation's soul. He had ensured that for the foreseeable future, America would remain a predominantly agricultural nation. The growth of cities and the rise of industry might be inevitable, but the purchase would slow that process, pushing it far into the future. This decision reveals the core of Jefferson's statesmanship. While he was a man of deep philosophical conviction, he was not a rigid ideologue incapable of compromise. When faced with a choice between strict adherence to constitutional theory and the practical realization of his grandest national vision, he chose the vision. He was willing to bend his own rules to achieve what he saw as the greater good, the creation of a stable, prosperous, and ever-expanding republic. The Louisiana Purchase was not only about gaining land for farmers, it was also a strategic move to insulate the United States from what Jefferson saw as the corrupting influences of urban elites and global power politics. By removing France from the heart of the continent, he eliminated the most immediate foreign threat to the young nation. This reduced the need for a large, expensive standing army and a powerful navy, institutions Jefferson distrusted. He saw large military establishments as tools of central governments that could be used to suppress the people and that were entangled with city-based financiers who profited from war. Securing the entire length of the Mississippi River and the port of New Orleans was a direct blow to East Coast merchants and to bankers. Before the purchase, Western farmers were at the mercy of coastal elites who controlled shipping and credit. The purchase gave farmers a secure, direct route to world markets, empowering them economically and making them less dependent on the financial center of Philadelphia and New York. This fit Jefferson's aim to decentralize economic power and keep it with agricultural producers. It can be read as an early anti-globalist or nationalist economic move. Jefferson feared tying the American economy too closely to Europe. He thought dependence on foreign trade would make the nation vulnerable to European whims, and would enrich a small class of international merchants at the expense of domestic producers. He imagined a largely self-sufficient nation, with farmers and local artisans producing most necessities. The vast new territory and its resources made continental self-sufficiency seem possible. But there was a tragic blind spot: the hundreds of thousands of Native Americans already living in the territory. In Jefferson's view, the land was empty, available for cultivation, a blank canvas for his agrarian republic. Expansion brought displacement, conflict, and suffering for indigenous nations. In conclusion, the decision to purchase the Louisiana Territory was the ultimate expression of Thomas Jefferson's core belief that the liberty and virtue of the American Republic were inextricably tied to the widespread ownership of land. He envisioned a nation of small, independent farmers, and he feared the alternative: cities, factories, and a dependent working class. To keep that agrarian dream alive, he required a vast reservoir of land, and when the opportunity to acquire half a continent presented itself in 1803, he seized it, even if it meant setting aside his own strict constitutional principles. The purchase fundamentally reshaped the United States, both physically and ideologically. It provided the physical space for westward expansion, fueling the pioneer spirit and creating new states built on an agricultural model. It secured the nation's economic independence by guaranteeing control over the vital Mississippi River trade route. We are exploring a foundational debate about the very soul of America, a debate about land, power, liberty, and who should wield it, which continues to shape the nation to this day.